So there's two fundamental things. The first one I learned was that I'm not stupid. I left at a very difficult time in my career because, and I'm sure a lot of female attorneys can relate to this, or Black attorneys can relate to this, where you leave varsity, right, and you're doing well, and you get picked up, especially by the big firms, because they wouldn't pick you otherwise if you're not smart, right? And then you get to the law firm, and then all of a sudden, you feel like you are stupid and you're not getting concepts. But what I actually realized was that I wasn't getting the support that I needed, right? So you would see some of your contemporaries going to meetings and being able to talk and have like valid statements or contributions. And you're like, how do they know this? Meanwhile, like 2 days before, the partner had taken them aside, had written out the structure for them, given them notes, said, read this case, given them background about the client we're going to see. And you then like get picked up on the way as they're going to a meeting because they need to window dress, right? Because now clients are starting to ask about transformation and they want to see diverse teams and all of that. And so let's bring Rory along. She'll just sit and take notes during the meeting. Then I'm like, but I'm not here to take notes. You know, I have a whole law degree. I studied to be here. I want to contribute as a lawyer.
Rorisang, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about women in the legal profession. We celebrate 100 years of women in law this year in South Africa. We have come a long way. And today I want us to reflect on your journey as a woman in the legal profession. But let's start at the beginning. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Rorisang Mzozoyana. My maiden surname is Mungwatu. I grew up in a small town in the Eastern Cape called Butterworth. I then went to high school in Grahamstown. I went to Victoria Girls High. I then went on to Rhodes. And at Rhodes, I studied law. I fell in love with the law at an early age. And after studying law, I moved to Johannesburg, to one of the big law firms in Joburg. And that's where I did my articles of clerkship. I was at Bowman Gilfillan for about 2 years. And then after Bowman Gilfillan, I got the opportunity to go overseas. And then after coming back from overseas, I went to work for Norton Rose. And then after that, I went into banking and finance in the private sector. So I moved from being external counsel to internal counsel, working for one of the big banks. I've worked for ABSA. I currently work for Nedbank as a senior legal counsel. And my area of focus is property finance law. But other than my day job, I have a big passion for mentoring young lawyers, and I currently run a mentorship program, and we have about 500 mentees at the moment. And I run monthly online mentorship groups, and I'm very active on social media. People call me a legal influencer, but it's a story for another day. But I am very active on social media around the legal profession. I'm very passionate about the legal profession. And so I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok around the legal profession and around mentoring junior lawyers who are coming up in the system.
All right, thank you. So let's just pause a little bit because I think you have an amazing story. So let's just go through your journey a little bit before we start having questions on women and their role in the legal profession in the next 100 years or so. It seems that you choose law very early on. You have a LLB from Rhodes, as you mentioned. You have a LLM from Wits. Why does Korean law?
Because of my dad. Whenever I answer this question, it like brings such a smile to my face because he was such a big influence on my life. He didn't get an opportunity to go to university. I think he had like a matric. And he grew up, he was ahead of his time. I mean, he grew up in apartheid South Africa. He would have loved to study law. He couldn't because of circumstances around race and around, the socio-economic standing of his family. But he carried that passion of law throughout his life. So he encouraged us a lot to go into law. We would go to like the match court and watch court cases during the week. And so that's where my love for the law started from. But I was also naturally inclined to it because I was that child who was like reading all the time and I was very argumentative, and he loved it. Like there was a lot of like going back and forth and he wanted us to reason. So I was raised in a household where children were heard, where children were challenged to think for themselves. And I definitely like one of the reasons I went into law was because of the house that I grew up in, but largely because of my father's influence.
I love that. I love it that he allowed you to have a voice early on, to not to talk back to elders, but to reason. And it's the way that you said it, is that um, reasoning means is that you question sometimes things, and that questioning sometimes is a healthy mind that is thinking about deeper philosophical things. And if parents allow their children to do that, they start flourishing, and they come up with amazing things. But then you decided, okay, later on you're going to go into banking and finance law. uh, my question is, why banking and finance law? Because as you would know in your experience, is that so little black women in the legal profession actually enter that particular space.
Sure. So I had no idea that banking and finance law existed in university. I didn't go to study law to become a banking and finance lawyer. I mean, as I said, I grew up in Butterworth, and the most successful lawyers in the town had the biggest car and the biggest houses. That's actually part of the reason why I also studied law, because I was like, oh, he's got a nice car and a nice house, and I want that too. But they're all like labor lawyers, criminal lawyers, divorce law, right? So in smaller, especially Black communities, when you see a lawyer, that's your idea of law, right? It's criminology, it's divorce, it's labor law. And the only time I realized that there were so many different sort of practice areas within law is my articles. And I mean, I studied this whole degree. I did VAC work programs at the big law firms. I sort of got a snippet of it during university because I did VAC work programs at two of the big law firms in Johannesburg. But it's actually once I got to the law firm where I realized that you've got banking and finance, you've got mergers and acquisitions, you've got corporate law. You have all of these other very different niche practice areas that are not just labor law and criminal law. And I actually read a book called Barbarians at the Gate in my first year. And it was about the biggest leverage buyout in New York. And like my mind went like, I was like, oh my goodness, there's like this whole world of banking and finance, mergers and acquisitions, company takeovers. And I was just like, actually, after I read that book, Barbarians at the Gate, like I was like, I am going to practice banking and finance law. I want to go into corporate law. I want to understand how companies work. And so I stumbled onto banking and finance and sort of corporate law late, like literally after I'd gotten my degree and I was already in a law firm. And that is what piqued my interest, actually. And you're right, there aren't a lot of Black people practicing bank and finance law. If back then, the demographics are much better now. And also women, a lot of them don't practice banking and finance law. And I actually changed, I did my articles, and then I practiced as a tax attorney for a year. And then after that, I wanted to move. And I said, no, I actually want to go into banking and finance. And unfortunately, a lot of people were trying to pigeonhole me, right? They're like, oh, no, it's too late for you to change now. You must stick with your tax. I'm like, no, this is like, I literally fought so hard for myself to move. Because people, again, wanted to pigeonhole me. And like, it's only these type of people who do banking and finance. It's so complicated. You'll never understand it. And part of the reason why, for example, I mentor people now is to break down those concepts and say it's actually not hard. It's just being able to be given the opportunity and shown how it works. And it's actually quite simple. So that is like how I found myself into banking and finance law. And I haven't looked back since.
That is great. And I love it when you say it's actually quite simple. Because one of the things is, and this is a result of coloniality and colonialism, and even Bantu education. There's certain things that our parents and people were not taught. You're not supposed to know how to make money and a living for yourself. So that is why the moment you kind of take the stigma away, it's actually not that difficult. Then you get more and more in that particular area. But you also were for a year and a half in the United States. So how did you get there, and what is the opportunity that led you to the United States?
So the United States stint was like life-changing for me. So I was able to go on a program that's run by the Cyrus Fan Center of the New York City Bar. And the New York City Bar is like our law society in South Africa. And within the New York City Bar, they have like different divisions that deal with different things. So the Cyrus Vance Center focuses on just broadening the reach of people in different jurisdictions for law, and they focus a lot on human rights law. But one of the programs that's run by the Cyrus Vance Center is the South African Visiting Lawyer Program. Now they've extended it to other African countries, but when I started, it was just a program that sort of started at the end of apartheid to try and give Black South African lawyers exposure to corporate law. So even back then, people realized that there was gatekeeping in doing corporate law and bank and finance law for Black lawyers in the country. And there weren't any, at the end of apartheid. So the program was started by the Cyrus Vance Center to try and give exposure to Black South African lawyers to corporate law, like at the highest level globally. So what the program does is it identifies about 4 lawyers a year. It ranges between 2 or 4. They usually have like 2,000 applications a year. You apply, and then they place you in all of the big law firms in New York, servicing Wall Street clients. So all of you, like your white shoe law firms in New York, they will then take in placements for the year. And what they do is the law firms themselves will pay you. So they'd pay you the same that they would pay their sort of first year sort of associates. And then the Cyrus Vance Center would support you with paying for your flights, organizing your visa, and then they'll give you like accommodation in New York for 2 weeks. And then after that, your law firm will start paying you. And then will give you support during the year where you attend events, and like they put you in touch with mentors and all of that. So that's how I got the opportunity to go to New York. It was through that Cyrus Vance Center program. As I've said, they've extended it now to other African countries. So it's actually the African Visiting Lawyer Program at the moment. And so they take about 4 people across Africa. And you need to sort of have some level of banking and finance or corporate experience. But when I went, I think I'd had like a year and a half of proper banking and finance experience. But they also look at stuff like, what are your pro bono initiatives? Are you involved in the community? What are you doing within the legal profession to sort of mentor other people and give back? So it was an amazing program, and it's still running now. So every year we have a cohort. And what's amazing about it is that now you've built up a great alumni base. So, and if you think about it, like some of the lawyers who went to the States, like in the 1990s and 1990s and the early 2000s, they're like at the peak of their careers now, right? I always joke, like if you look at my WhatsApp group for that program, it's like, I don't even believe I'm on this group, because some of the lawyers on there have just gone on to do such amazing things. But we have an alumni network that's active, that's doing a few interesting things in the country at the moment. And it's a great alumni network to be part of. And it's a great program.
So apart from that amazing alumni network, what are some of the things that you brought with you, the lessons back to South Africa after your time in the States?
So there's 2 fundamental things. The first one I learned was that I'm not stupid. I left at a very difficult time in my career because, and I'm sure a lot of female attorneys can relate to this, or Black attorneys can relate to this, where you leave varsity, right, and you're doing well, and you get picked up, especially by the big firms, because they wouldn't pick you otherwise if you're not smart, right? And then you get to the law firm, and then all of a sudden, you feel like you are stupid and you're not getting concepts. But what I actually realized was that I wasn't getting the support that I needed, right? So you would see some of your contemporaries going to meetings and being able to talk and have like valid statements or contributions. And you're like, how do they know this? Meanwhile, like 2 days before, the partner had taken them aside, had written out the structure for them, given them notes, said, read this case, given them background about the client we're going to see. And you then like get picked up on the way as they're going to a meeting because they need to window dress, right? Because now clients are starting to ask about transformation, and they want to see diverse teams and all of that. And so let's bring Rory along. She'll just sit and take notes during the meeting. And I'm like, but I'm not here to take notes. You know, I have a whole law degree. I studied to be here. I want to contribute as a lawyer. And that can be very frustrating for a junior lawyer and a junior attorney, because then you start doubting your capabilities. And you're like, but when did I become stupid? Because I was smart in varsity, and then I get here and I'm like, And what the States gave me was such a boost of confidence because I did so well, because I was given the support, right? I was like, oh, okay, if you actually explain something to me before you take me to a meeting, I'll actually have something to contribute in the meeting. And that's why I actually ended up being there for a year and a half, because the program is actually a year. But I did so well that they actually extended my stay for another 6 months. And I mean, I was at Cleary Gottlieb Steen in Hamilton, which is one of the biggest law firms in the world. We were servicing Wall Street clients. We were working with multi-billion-dollar global transactions. And I actually had something valid to contribute. And so one of my biggest takeaways was that you need support, right? And that's why they call it the practice of law. You need to practice it. Someone needs to show it to you. You can't read it from a book. So it doesn't matter how smart you are. You will get to a point where your learning curve sort of tapers off, because for you as a lawyer to move on to the next level, you need someone to show you practically how to do it. I always say it's like swimming, right? You can't learn how to swim from reading a book. You need to get into a pool. And then the issue in South Africa is that there are gatekeepers stopping certain people from getting into the pool. So that was a big lesson for me. And then the other lesson was the fact that law firms are not doing you a favor by training you. It's a two-way process. So one of the best experiences I had at Cleary was, as first-year associates, we were brought into a room by HR, and HR says to us, 90% of you are not going to make it to partnership. We know that. It's the attrition rate. We know that. We work you very hard, and 90%, and for different reasons, you will leave. But because of the training you've gotten in this law firm, we know that you're going to move on and be titans of industry. You're going to lead all of the big banks, because our clients were like the big banks: Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, JP Morgan. And those are big global banks, right? Citibank. And they're like, but when you leave here, you're going to be poached to go in-house because of the caliber of the law firm you work in and because of the type of training that you get. And then you're going to go into those banks and you're going to head up legal departments and we're going to be asking you for work. So it's in our best interests to make sure that you have a good time while you're here. So if you want to leave at any point, come to us as HR. We're going to train you on your interview skills. They had like a little booklet of all of the alumni and all of the big corporates around the world. They're like, you want to go into any bank, you want to go into academia, you want to go into like corporate America, these are the alumni we have in each of the institutions. We can put you in touch with alumni who were trained in this law firm. And if you want to get in there, we're going to help you. We want you to have a good relationship with us because we have an obligation to train you. In as much as you're here to work, we also have an obligation to train. My mind was like, it was blown, because the idea I had was that, law firms are doing you a favor by hiring you. You should be so grateful for the crumbs from the table that they're giving you. And I actually realized that you have a lot more power than you let on, or that other people let you on. And so the States gave me that sense of power, that sense of confidence in myself. And when I came back, I was like, no, you're not doing me a favor by training me. I am a smart Black woman who is competent. You are lucky to actually have me here. Yes, I'm willing to work. I want to work hard, but I have a threshold. I have a threshold, and there's certain things that I want to be treated in a certain way, right? And the fact that I realized that I am not stupid, that I can be trained, and that, you can't just take me to a meeting like 5 minutes before the meeting. You need to come to me properly and give me proper instruction. So for me, the States gave me that. The fact that, law firms are not doing you a favor by training you, and you will actually end up being a client of the law firms. And so they better make sure that, law firms treat young lawyers well.
So on that learning curve, like this is one of the things that that I'm taking away from your response is that you learn something. It's practice of law. There was organization that was geared towards teaching and learning. So you also decided, okay, I want to give lecturing a chance, and you are one of the many participants on those podcasts that is currently teaching, and you lectured real estate law. So how did you get into teaching? Why that specific move?
So I lectured real estate law at Wits in my third year of practicing law. So I was practicing at a law firm, but I just have always felt the need to teach. It's a calling, right? But unfortunately, we have to pay the bills. So we have to go into corporate. But it really is a passion for me. I enjoy giving knowledge. And one of my earlier mentors said to me, the best way for you to learn something is to teach it. And so for me as a junior attorney, I also wanted to test myself, right? And test my knowledge. So it helped me in as much as I was giving back and I was teaching junior lawyers, not at a much reduced pay scale, right? And it's not about the money. Like people who are in corporate and then go in to teach, they're not doing it for the money. They're definitely doing it for other reasons. So it helped me hone my skills around real estate because I had to simplify it so that I can teach it to other people. I also had an issue about public speaking, and I knew that one of the things that I need to work on in order for my career to grow was to be able to speak to people. And so it was also groundwork for me to train myself to speak in public, baptism by fire. I know I'm a sucker for punishment, but I was like, okay, I'm going to have to public speak every Tuesday for an hour for the next 6 months while I'm teaching this course. And by the end, I'll definitely be better. So that was part of the reason why I also do it. Those were the selfish reasons. But also the altruistic reasons were because I just enjoyed it, right? And I also realized, again, going back to this thing of people make things complicated. But if you have someone to explain it to you and to simplify it to you, then it's not complicated. So I wanted to teach law in a way that was simple. I wanted to break it down to first principles and sort of impart the knowledge that I had received. Since then, so that was about 10, 12 years ago when I lectured for Wits. I've subsequently also have lectured online for UCT, and I've also done stuff for the South African Property Owners Association where, you need to teach law, even teaching law to people who are not lawyers. That's where the test is, right? So that when you're teaching people who are not in the practice area or who are not familiar with the concepts and they can still understand it, that's when you actually know yourself that you understand it because you can break it down to simple principles. So teaching has always sort of been part of my career in as much as I've had corporate. It has sort of been like this lateral sort of move as well with teaching that has followed me throughout my career, and I still do it now. As I said earlier on, I also run this mentorship program, and that's part of the same reasons why I do it, to sort of give back, to make sure that people don't go through the issues that I went through as much as possible. Obviously, you can't fix the whole system by yourself, but in my little corner of the world, I try to do that. So to try and sort of guide junior lawyers away from the mistakes that I made, to sort of give them the guidance that I wasn't given earlier on in my career, but also to just let people know that the stuff is not hard, right? If you break it down, it's actually quite simple.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you hear there, the stuff is really not hard. It's really the quality of the teachers and how simple they can actually break down complex concepts. And I think that's the secret to teaching. But this podcast is about celebrating 100 years of women. And you're one of the thousands of women who have entered the legal profession 100 years ago. So, what are your reflections on the state of women in the legal profession? Will it be better in the next 100 years?
So there's a saying that I really like, and I forget who it's by, but it goes something like, when men are oppressed, it's a tragedy. But when women are oppressed, it's tradition. And that statement came to mind when I sort of reading the earlier cases around women trying to enter the legal profession before the Women Practitioners Act or Bill was passed in 1923. And all of the cases, I think it's the Schlesien case and the Worsley case that talks about all of these women who were trying to be admitted as the lawyer, and these judges were penning these atrocious judgments about why women could not become lawyers. And a lot of it was based on, oh no, it's tradition. Women cannot handle the law. women have got obligations at home. The fiber of society would break down if women were in the workplace. All of those atrocious statements. And yes, we have come a long way from those judgments. But we've come a long way from the time that those judgments were written. And if you look at the stats, right, I think the Law Society's, the latest stats were like from 2020, and about 42% of women who are, 42% of people who are registered legal practitioners are women. But then if you look at the stats, when it comes to leadership and who the partners are in the law firms, it's more like 80% are men, and then the other 20% are women. So something goes wrong from the process of who are the actual practitioners or people who start out as lawyers, and then the people who then end up becoming leaders of law firms, the people who become judges, the people who are at the helm of the legal profession. And so, yes, we've come far. There's definitely a lot more that can be done. And we all know what the issues are around the legal profession, and I've touched on some of them. There's definitely discrimination. There's definitely harassment of women. There are definitely issues around women not being supported, women not being trained, women not being taken seriously within the legal profession. I mean, one of the most atrocious things was the JSC hearings for Mandisa Maya, right? And one of the people asked her during her interviews, like, about her being a woman and how she would deal with looking after, like, being a family woman and, you know, being a judge. I'm like, you would never ask any man that, right? So those things are still pervasive within the legal profession. Even at the highest level, you still deal with those issues. And so I do have hope. I do have hope that things are going to get better within the next 100 years. We have a lot of dynamic women within the legal profession who are actually trying to change things. And I think the tide is turning. So I have hope.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's the next 100 years. So there's hope. But next year we're celebrating 30 years of our democracy in South Africa. As a woman in South Africa, and women who play the leading role in the liberation struggle in South Africa, will there be a next 30 years of our democracy? That's the big question.
Of course. I mean, South Africans are resilient people, and whatever issues we have now, we definitely will have, I think, a thriving democracy within the next 30 years in South Africa. I think our civil service, so our civil organizations are very strong. We have a very strong media. I think the separation of powers in South Africa is still very strong. We have a very strong judiciary that keeps the executive to account. And from a structural perspective in South Africa, we have the right laws, right, that protect women. So we have our Constitution and our Bill of Rights that make sure that ensures that all South Africans are treated equally before the law and all South Africans are equal. We have a Bill of Rights that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex or gender or sexual orientation. And then we have laws that, for example, protect the right of women to have an abortion. We're not in America where they've just overturned Roe versus Wade, where you don't actually have control over your own body. In South Africa, we're actually a lot more liberated than in other countries. Even countries you would think are first world countries, right? Women in South Africa are protected in terms of the law in more ways than one. And we have like the Domestic Violence Act. And so the law is there, and we have organizations like the South African Human Rights Commission or the Commission on Gender Equality, which are institutions that are set up, or umbrella institutions that are set up under our Constitution. And so from a legislative point of view, women have the protection that they need in South Africa. And even when you look at Parliament, I think we are the third most from a gender perspective, equal parliament in South Africa. I think 40% of our parliamentarians are women. And so structurally, we are there or thereabouts, but always the issue is the implementation, right? So women still do suffer disproportionately in South Africa from socioeconomic reasons. Women, especially of childbearing age, are disproportionately affected by HIV. Women are, gender-based violence is a big issue for South Africa. And so even though structurally, we are protected from women as women in the country, the implementation is slightly different, and we are disproportionately affected by a lot of issues that are plaguing South Africa. That being said, I do think we have a strong civil society. We have very strong women who are leading the charge in South Africa to try and fix all of those issues. And I think South Africa will remain the beacon of democracy that it is across Africa, and I have hope for the country.
Thank you for that. So the final question I have is you giving back a little bit. I know you're giving back already a lot. You're a mentor and you have an amazing online program. But any person who listen to this podcast, especially if that person is men or woman or however that person identify, in particular, I'm more interested in a message that you have for young women who want to enter the legal profession and want to follow your footsteps. Do you have any advice for them?
Two things. The first one is that you must know that you are enough, and that people, like the people you look up to, right? So the people who think, oh, people know so much about the law, or this is a big name partner, or this is a big general counsel. People are not as smart as they seem to be. So don't doubt yourself. And I've had so many instances in my life where I've walked into a room and I've seen a man, I thought, oh, this person is going to be much smarter than me. And it's unconscious bias, and we all have it. So unconscious bias can work one of two ways. It can make you think someone is inferior to you, but it can also make you feel like someone is superior to you, right? And so if in your mind you always think white men are smart, or you think men are smart, or you think people older than you are smart, that's unconscious bias. And so even before they open their mouths, right, you think, oh, this person is smarter than me. And I've been taught that lesson time and time again in my career, where I've instantly doubted myself, and then someone opens their mouth and I'm like, you can't be serious. This is you saying this, So just remember that whatever room you walk into, whatever tables you get invited to, you're there for a reason. You are there because you're worthy. And people are not as smart as you might think, and you always have something to contribute. So that's my 2 cents worth on a positive message for women entering into the legal profession.
Rorisang, thank you very much for this conversation. I think a lot of people will benefit from it, especially young women, but definitely young men is also going to benefit from it. The one thing I would love South Africans to have is to have more conversation with young men, and even love the most despicable of it. I'm a true firm believer that they love chaos. And I come from a family that was, my grandfather was very abusive because of apartheid and all of those things. But I had a grandmother that never stopped loving. And it's because of her love that she kind of rescued many of the young men. So thank you for this. Yeah, thank you for this, because I think your positive message that you are enough is so also applicable for young men. Young men walking into a corporate that has the kind of imposter syndrome would know that these people that they're sitting with is not that smart. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and um, all the best on your amazing journey.
Thank you so much. This is great. Thank you for having me.